to a degree.
All drop.
Reducing it. All drop.
All drop.
All drop. Hi, my name is Henry and welcome to the Pinkbike Field Test. We're here in Sun Peaks in BC and we've got some of the latest and greatest enduro bikes and we are here to compare them. This is the 170mm Transition Spire, and although its long low geometry screams slugger, it has a poise and nimbility that could surprise many, but we'll get onto that in good time. Of course, the Spire isn't the first long travel 29er from Transition. There is also the Sentinel, which many of you might be familiar with. The Sentinel, however, now in its second iteration, still doesn't come near this when we talk about low long geometry. Whereas the Sentinel has 150mm of rear wheel travel, this bruiser has 170mm, and Transition claim combines mid-travel efficiency with downhill bike capability. Speaking of geometry, this bike with a 63-degree head angle is slacker than a substitute teacher going through a difficult divorce, and that's not even touching the flip chip, which takes a further half a degree off. Now, half a degree isn't a massive change, but it is notable on a bike that is already so slack. The seat tube, on the other hand, is incredibly steep at over 78 degrees. If you were to ride this bike in its high setting, which to be honest is the one I prefer, you'd be riding the bike in the small, medium and large with 446mm chainstays. If you were riding the XL or double XL, you'd add an extra 6mm to that for a whopping 452 rear end. The large on test here has a reach of 480mm and its 1.5-inch straight head tube means you've got loads of options should you want to go tinkering with reach or angle adjust headsets. Now, if you please, let's transition onto the suspension. So this bike here uses the brand's Giddy Up system. This is essentially a 4-bar that delivers 170mm of travel. It does so via a 65mm stroke on a 230 I2I trunnion mounted shock. The Giddy Up suspension uses 23% progression over the bike's entire stroke. On the front of the bike there is a RockShox Zeb Ultimate with a Charger 2 damper that has 170mm of travel. We're here in beautiful Sun Peaks to test this bike, and on that hill we've got every type of trail that you could hope to find. So it's time to see how the Transition Spire stacks up against its contemporaries.
All right, Matt, Henry, you guys have been lapping the shit out of the Spire up in the Sun Peaks Bike Park for a while now. But first, we have to talk about climbing, and you guys also did a bunch of that. So my question to you is, the Spire, it's the longest, slackest bike here. It's also the lowest bike here. Let's talk handling first. Slow, tight trails. Is that thing a handful? Because it looks like it would be.
It was definitely rescued by the steep seat tube angle. It's a capable climber. The things that make it, for me, when I rode it on the descent, gave it such great small bump sensitivity, kind of came back to bite you in the ass on the climbs a bit, and it did have you reaching for the climb switch.
All right, so Henry, why is this bike relatively manageable, much more so than the numbers might suggest?
Primarily, it's very light, and that absolutely plays a factor.
Okay.
It's not the be all and end all. There's no reason why performance should go hand in hand with lightweight, but on the climbs, it does help. Like I said, the reach of it, which isn't excessively long at 480, is rescued by that steeper seat tube angle, and it's very balanced bike.
So Henry, you mentioned that it didn't feel all that efficient on the trail, but when it came to the efficiency test, it was the second fastest.
Yep.
Now, the caveat here is that the efficiency test is on a smooth gravel road. So why do you think it might not have felt like that on the trail?
Well, how a bike pedals, like I said, on a smooth gravel road, potentially at a high cadence where you're not having to time anything, is going to be different to when you are, slugging it up some single track.
Throwing your weight around, stabbing at the pedals, trying to get up and over something, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. I mean, it's not that it felt awful, but there was a definite pedal bob at the beginning of the stroke.
Yeah.
We're going to come back to how that affects the ride on the descents, and it is actually a big positive.
Yeah.
But I'd be lying if I didn't say I wasn't reaching for that climb switch pretty quickly as soon as it pointed uphill.
Interesting. I'd like you to compare the Spire to the Norco Range, and that range weighs a little over 37 pounds. It's quite a bit heavier than the Spire. It also has an idler pulley, much like the GT, and I think you mentioned that it didn't really feel all that efficient, the chain feeding up through the idler. So if you had to do a lot of climbing, but you wanted a long travel bike, is the Spire the bike, or is there another bike in our fleet here that makes sense?
Yeah, we have the Carbon Spire on test, so it is light at 32 pounds. And then compared to the two idler bikes, the GT and the Norco, once you get into those top 3 gears, that cadence of like ratcheting over like the 12 and 6 position is a lot more noticeable on the transition. Like it's a lightweight bike. And like Henry said, once you have the climb switch flipped, it's pretty agile and goes up the hill fast.
All right, guys, the climbing is behind us. Thank God. It's time to descend. Henry, one thing that you said to me a couple of times actually over the past couple of weeks was how quickly you got on with the Spire. You said it felt like home right away. Why do you think that is?
I think it's just similar to the Norco, actually. It's just kind of, simple, good ingredients cooked well. It's nothing too crazy. Everything's where you want it. The handlebars are a sensible shape straight from the off, which for me is important. And there are things like, for instance, the GT, which once you get used to it is a great bike, but it does have a particular characteristic, and we'll get into when we get into that review, that it does just take a little bit of adapting. Maybe it's indicative of the bikes I'm normally used to riding. I've spent a good chunk of time on our bike from last year, the Specialized Enduro, before coming here. But for whatever reason, the transition, I just got on it. Everything was how I expected, and everything just worked. It was great.
All right, okay, I'm gonna come back to you, Henry, because we're gonna talk about some suspension stuff real soon, but first I wanna talk about downhill timing. Matt, you did all of that. Where did the transition end up?
It was a 250.76, and it felt fast on the trail. It was, really light. It was very central in the geometry or in the wheelbase of the bike, and it felt quick in and out of the turns. But I think it was just a little bit longer, and maybe the track was a bit flatter, just for the geometry of the bike. So even though I felt comfortable on it, it wasn't necessarily the quickest to pump in and out of things.
Yep.
I had a tough time finding that like perfect shock pressure.
Yeah.
It was like a little bit harsh, maybe not as bad as the YT, but certainly not like a magic carpet like the Norco.
Okay, all right. So speaking of a little bit harsh, could you speak to that a little bit?
I would say we had very different. This is the one bike. Normally our Venn diagrams are like, like perfect eclipse. This is the one where we didn't quite have the same, eye to eye on how the transition felt. I would say I found it to be, great small bump compliance. To be honest with you, I found that to the point where the small bump compliance was so ample, I was actually dialing in the external low speed compression just to slow the shaft speed down, because it felt like that initial bit of free fall as you're getting those flutters, and just to make the bike feel a bit more stable.
Okay, Matt, let's talk about the kind of terrain that the Spire best suits. Is this something that is going to be at home on like the gnarliest, steepest stuff, or is this a bike that's maybe more well-rounded regardless of what those numbers say?
Yeah, it's really light, but it definitely has close to downhill bike geometry. So you're going to be able to like comfortably ride, smooth flow trails, but it's really going to shine when you point it down the nasty stuff.
All right, Henry?
When you are going through the rough stuff and you do feather those brakes a bit or get on the brakes, it doesn't have that super kind of high in its travel feel. It does hunker down. Like I said, I really like that. It feels a very stable bike to me.
All right, let's talk about the front of the bike before we move on. What's the story with that 170 millimeter Zeb?
I really liked the small bump compliance. It had really good ramp, good mid-stroke. Yeah, quite enjoyable.
So I guess the Zeb would be our first component high. Henry, do you have a component low for me to balance that out?
It's not the end of the world, but basically due to some supply chain problems, the large currently comes with a shorter seat post than it will do in the future. In the future, it's going to come with a 210. Now I believe it comes with only a 180, which is
wait, you can't have that as a con.
But hear me out. I can have it as a con because that's not what they wanted. They didn't want it. I don't care.
Yeah.
They didn't want it.
I'm just saying 180 is plenty.
But what's cool about the system they're using, they're using one up and you can shim those down and travel. I think the idea being that basically you have you have the post fully into the frame, and then you can actually sort of fine tune to a degree.
All
but
drop.
Reducing it. All drop.
All drop.
All drop.
Matt, you mentioned the 165 mil cranks a couple times.
Yeah, you know what? On a bike like this, I really like them, but I think some people might find them a little stubby, you know, like.
I mean, the bottom bracket is this high off the ground though, Matt.
For sure. It's a con and a pro, so depends which way you look at it.
Yeah, I mean, on a bike like this, and it sounds a bit cheesy to say, there are a lot of times people say, it's like a downhill bike, even though it's an enduro bike. Most of the time, it's a load of nonsense. This actually could be a real downhill bike. Why not have downhill length cranks on it?
Right. We should also actually mention something about the frame that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it can take a dual crank fork like the Norco, and it absolutely merits one.
Yeah, and it has that full 56 top and bottom cup, so you can play with the reach extension or angle sets if you wanted to go maybe a little bit steeper, if that was too crazy for you.
Yeah, and what I also really like about that transition, a big component high for me, is it's got a 220mm rotor on the front.
For sure.
Bang for buck in terms of like pound for pound, how to make a brake's performance or a bike's performance better. Bigger rotors are just so easy. Why not?
Let's move on to models and pricing. Transition actually offers the Spire in both an aluminum and a carbon version. You could save about $1,100 if you go with that aluminum version. But there's also a GX bike and
an XT bike. So to keep track of what's going on test, we had the $6,000 carbon GX. So that's not the one with
what
the
kind of
XT.
drivetrain does it have?
Yeah, yeah, right. So that's the Alloy SLX version.
Yeah.
No, only joking. This is of course the Carbon GX. So there is a version higher, which basically comes with kind of Fox factory, as well as Shimano XT. This one, I don't know, it's got a pretty solid spec, wouldn't you say, Matt?
Yeah, I would agree. I didn't find that anything held it back. It had really nice brakes, Code RSCs, had the Eagle, so big range there, nice dropper post. Lots of tuning on the suspension. Yeah, kind of well-rounded.
All right, well, I'm gonna throw my hat into the ring with this because the aluminum version sounds damn impressive to me. You save $1,100 and you're getting that geometry and the suspension that really make the bike what it is. Of course, the frame is gonna be, you know, 1.5 pounds or something heavier. I don't actually know the exact numbers, but it's gonna be heavier. But I mean, it's gonna handle the same.
Yeah, I mean, it starts from basically $3,800 as well.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's actually represents kind of okay value. It's going to be a capable bike, bang on geometry that's not just going to be good this year, but in years to come, I think, as well.
All right, on to pros and cons. Henry, you get pros this time. What did you like?
You know, I really liked the geometry, and predominantly, and it's something we've been talking about all week, you know, from bike to bike. It's a bike that just really fit me, and that can't be understated. You can have all the fanciest bits hung off the frame, but if the frame doesn't give you confidence and feel like it fits you, for me with that, you know, long front end, you know, that long front center, that slack head angle, and steep seat tube angle, it fit me like a glove.
Yeah. You also mentioned the spec a couple times over the last couple weeks too.
Yeah, I think it's a really sensibly spec'd bike. Hasn't got the carbon rims or anything like that.
Unrideable.
It doesn't really, yeah, right, exactly. It doesn't need it. It's got powerful brakes, good suspension, good drivetrain. Just,
right.
You know, doing the basics right.
Matt, you've got cons this time.
Yeah, just a couple. The external brake routing, you know, may suit some people. Don't really do a lot of brake or frame swapping anymore these days. So I would like to see that tucked inside. And then the other thing would be the geometry. It's pretty extreme, so it's not gonna suit riders everywhere like some of the other bikes on test. And you really have to push it to get up to speed. So for that reason, if you live in a place where it's a bit flatter or you're not like really on your game that day, it could feel a little bit unlively.
So in light of all that, what type of rider should be considering this Spire?
I mean, I think somebody that ends up considering the Spire will probably be looking at bikes like the Norco as well. I think the Spire is a really good bike for someone that almost always pedals and occasionally rides lifts, where someone that rides the Norco is perhaps the other way around. I think the Transition is just a great bike to kind of do it all on, have big rides on. And also, if you want to kind of get a bit serious, you can do that too. All
right, that is our review of Transition's all-new 170mm travel Spire. Stay tuned for a whole bunch more reviews. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of them, and we'll see you next video.